Hi, boys and girls. What? There's someone with me today? Where? I don't see anybody. There is someone with me today. I tricked you, didn't I? I put her there. Do you know who that is? If you said Little Red Riding Hood, you're right. Today we're going to read out of our fairy tale book, and we're going to read the story of the fairy tale of Red Riding Hood. It's called Red Riding Hood in our book. And this fairy tale was written down by the Brothers Grimm. The Brothers Grimm were two brothers that traveled around Germany listening to lots of people tell all of their stories, and then they went and wrote them down together as a team. So this is one of their stories. So if you want to go get your fairy tale book, go ahead and pause it and come back and join us. We're going to be on page 118 today. Remember, if you have your book, listen for the sound to turn the page. Okay? Long ago, there lived a little girl who was loved by all who knew her, but she was especially dear to her grandmother. The woman would do anything to make the child happy, and once she gave her a soft red velvet cloak. It was so very pretty that from that day on, the girl would wear nothing else, and she came to be called Red Riding Hood. One day her mother said to her, "Come here, Red Riding Hood, and carry this cake and bottle of wine to grandmother. She is ill, and she will be glad to have them. Go quickly before the sun is high, and do not daydream or wander about in the forest. When you come into grandmother's room, you must curtsy and wish her good morning." Do you know what curtsy means? That's how a girl bows. She curtsies. "I will do just as you say," Red Riding Hood promised. Her grandmother lived a good distance from the village in the midst of the forest. That means the middle of the forest. When Red Riding Hood came to the edge of the forest, she met a wolf. The child did not know that he was a wicked animal, and so she was not afraid of him at all. "Good morning, Red Riding Hood," he said. "Good morning, Wolf." "And where are you off to so early, Red Riding Hood?" "To grandmother's." "What is in your basket?" "A cake and some wine. I'm taking it to grandmother. She is ill, and she wants something to make her stronger." "Where does your grandmother live, Red Riding Hood?" Do you think she should be talking to him? What did her mom warn her not to do? Here's the picture of her mom giving her the basket. And we're ready to turn the page. Okay. So where does your grandmother live, Red Riding Hood? "Down the path and into the forest. Her house stands beneath 3 big oak trees near a hedge of chestnuts." "Surely you must know it," said Red Riding Hood. Do you think that was a good idea for her to say exactly where the grandma lived? I don't either. Here's a picture of the wolf talking to her. The wolf looked her up and down and thought to himself, "This tender child will be a juicy morsel, even nicer than the old woman. If I am clever, I shall be able to snap them both up." He walked along with Red Riding Hood for a time. Then he said, "Look at all the flowers, Red Riding Hood. Why don't you look about you? I think you do not even hear the birds sing. You are just as solemn as if you were going to school, but everything is so gay out here in the woods." Red Riding Hood raised her eyes, and when she saw the sunlight dancing through the trees and the bright flowers, she thought, suppose I pick a bouquet for grandmother. That would please her. And it is still quite early." So she's thinking about stopping to pick flowers to make a bouquet for her grandma. So she left the path and wandered off amongst the trees to pick flowers. Each time she picked one, she saw another, more beautiful, further on. In this way, she went deeper, turn the page, and deeper into the forest, and the sun rose high in the sky. After he left Red Riding Hood, the wolf went straight to the grandmother's house and knocked on the door. "Who is there?" It is Red Riding Hood. Bring you a cake and some wine. Open the door. Lift the latch, cried the old woman. I am too weak to get up. The wolf lifted the latch and the door sprang open. He went straight in without saying a word and ate up the old woman. Then he put on her nightgown and nightcap, climbed into bed, and drew the curtains. Red Riding Hood ran about picking flowers until she could carry no more, and then she remembered her grandmother again. When she got to the cottage, she was astonished or surprised to find the door open, and when she went into the room, everything seemed strange. She felt very frightened, but she did not know why. "Good morning, grandmother," she cried, but she heard no answer. Then she went up to the bed and drew the curtains. There lay her grandmother, but she had pulled her cap down over her face, and she looked very odd. Do you think it was the grandma? "Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have," she said. "The better to hear you with, my dear." "And grandmother, what big eyes you have." "The better to see you with, my dear." "What big hands you have, grandmother." "The better to catch hold of you, dear." "But grandmother, what big teeth you have." "The better to eat you with, my dear." Then the wolf sprang out of bed, rushed at Little Red Riding Hood, and devoured her in one mouthful. With his belly full, the wolf, look, there's a picture of him leaping out of bed. With his belly full, turn the page. The wolf went back to bed, and soon he was snoring loudly. Some time later, a huntsman passed by the house and heard a fearful racket. "How loudly the old woman is snoring," he thought. "I must see if there is something the matter with her." So he went inside and up to the bed, where he found the wolf fast asleep. "Is it really you, you old rascal?" he said. "Long enough have I sought you." He raised up his gun to shoot, then suddenly thought that perhaps the wolf had eaten up the old lady, and she might still be saved. So he took a knife and began to cut open the sleeping wolf. At his first cut, he saw the red cloak, and after a few more slashes, the little girl sprang out. "Oh, how frightened I was! It was so dark and close inside the wolf," she cried. Next, the grandmother came out. She was still alive, but hardly able to breathe. The huntsman told Red Riding Hood to bring some big stones. Then they filled the wolf's belly with them and sewed him up. When the wolf awoke and tried to run away, the stones dragged him back and he fell down dead at last. They were all joyful now. The huntsman skinned the wolf and took away the skin. The grandmother ate the cake and drank the wine Red Riding Hood had brought, and soon was stronger. And as for Red Riding Hood, she knew now that she must listen to her mother and never wander off in the forest again. And here's a picture of the woodcutter saving Grandma and Red Riding Hood. Is that story a little bit different than how you've heard it? Maybe you've heard that the wolf puts Grandma in the closet and then dresses up in her clothes, and the woodcutter saves them before he eats them, right? So this is just a different version of the story than maybe you've heard. This is the way that the Brothers Grimm heard it in Germany and wrote it down. Okay? Thank you for joining me. We'll review Red Riding Hood next time you come to Daily Dose, and I'll have a special surprise for you. Okay? Have a great day.